how Mozart had the most phenomenal ear for key color of any composer ever. And by the end of his life, I think it's fair to say that certain keys really had certain meanings in his musical language. And I think you can see this developing over his operas. Idomeneo, 10 years before the Magic Flute, is the one where you see it really falling into place. And then in all his subsequent operas, you can see the very particular association of certain keys and motifs with certain states. So, and in the Magic Flute is absolutely the climax of that. So, for example, the main key of the opera, E flat major. Now, it is a Masonic key because it has 3 flats in it. But more importantly than that, it's in the vocabulary of the classical era, it's the richest key. It's the most round and warm. And in Mozart's musical vocabulary, it's an aristocratic key. And it always is in all the operas. So, for example, in Idomeneo, Ilia, the princess, she sings in E flat major. In Don Giovanni, Elvira, who is a rather posh woman as well, she is... she's in E flat major, so on and so on. It's a key of aristocrats. Now, in this piece, it is the key of lights, of enlightenment. It's the key of Tamino, the prince, of his portrait aria. And it's the key that begins and ends the opera. Now, something amazing happens in this piece is that through the richness of Mozart's key vocabulary, he is able to condense his philosophical, I wouldn't say message, that's too didactic, his philosophical thoughts in this piece into the music. So I'll try and explain what I mean. We start with E flat major. Now, Papageno, the other end of humanity, if you like, from Tamino, his key is G major. Now, Papageno is a simple guy. He's no aristocrat. He's a down-to-earth, ordinary bloke who likes a woman and a drink and a bite to eat, and not too much more. He's not seeking enlightenment like Tamino is. So he's in G major, which is a very simple, bright, open key. And in all Mozart operas, G major is associated always with working-class people. So when Zerlina and Mazzetto enter in Don Giovanni, they're in G major. In Così fan tutte, Despina, the maid, she's in G major. In Figaro, the maidservants are in G major. So it's always the key of the more modest people, the working classes, the servants, the ordinary people in Mozart's operas. They almost invariably seem to turn up in G major. Now, Papageno does. So right at the start of the piece, we have this duality of E flat major, aristocrats, light, enlightenment, philosophy, Tamino, princes, and then G major, ordinary blokes having a bit of food and wine. Now, Mozart's idea in the piece, in the end, is that actually, to be a fully rounded person, you need both of these elements. You can't just be a philosopher prince, and you can't just be a hard-drinking buffoon. You need to have a contrast in your life. And through a rather astonishing process, he manages to work this into the very fabric of the music. Now, I'll try and explain what I mean. He condensed it all into the overture, which he wrote last. He wrote the overture after the rest of the music. And here's how he started the piece. So, let's have a look at the outlines of those. If you listen to the top part, the melody part, E flat, the central key of the opera, philosophy, aristocracy. G is the next note. The simple life, ordinary people. Then we go up, E flat, G. Where do we get beyond that? We get to B flat, B flat. Now, we're going on a journey upwards there, you see. Bum, bum, bum. Now those notes become very, very important in the piece. The notes you hear at the beginning, they recur at crucial junctures in the action. Now, for example, when Pamino and the boys are talking after the boys have persuaded Pamina not to kill herself. And they say the gods will protect us evermore. And on the word, the gods, she sings that phrase, the gods, going up there, rising up high. Also in her duet with Papageno, where they talk about man and wife rising together towards a state of godliness, of paradise on earth. They use those same notes going up. So that is our top part. Now, the bottom part. Let's listen to those three notes. E flat, again, that's our starting central point. C minor, C minor. Now, C minor in this opera, as in most of Mozart's operas, is the key of tragedy, of challenge, of struggle, of overcoming despair. There's that unbelievable chorus in Idomeneo, which is in C minor, O voto tremendo. In all of the operas, C minor is a key of darkness and struggle, of finding your way out from the darkness somehow. It's the key of the Masonic funeral music, which then becomes the great climactic scene in the Magic Flute of the armored men. Which is in C minor. Now, Tamino faces two life-threatening moments in the Magic Flute. The first one is the beginning, when he's being pursued by a killer snake, and he's in C minor. And then the other one is a much more sort of philosophical way of approaching death, but it is approaching death, is the armored men scene and the beginning of his trials of fire and water. In both of those pieces, he looks at death in the face, much as Mozart does in some of his great C minor pieces, like the C minor piano concerto. This one. So that's C minor. Then, going back to the overture, you see we've had E flat, C in the bass line. Then, where do we get? G. Papageno's key. Jolliness. So, what we have is a musical metaphor in the first three chords of the piece. The top part saying, you need seriousness, philosophy, application, hard work. G. You need a bit of fun in your life. You need a wife, you need some drink and some food, and you need to relax and dance and have fun sometimes. And if you do, then you'll keep rising towards the light, towards the gods and paradise on earth. In the bass line, we have again E flat, C minor, struggle. You must struggle. You have to face death and face the difficulties of life and overcome them. And G again, you have to incorporate you have to be a normal person. And this is the philosophical, I don't want to be too didactic, but I think this is the philosophical idea of the piece, is that finding your way in life is finding your way through these different qualities you need to have, the princely, serious qualities, and the menschlich, normal qualities, being an ordinary person, and bravely facing the struggles and the difficulties of life, as Tamino does and as Papageno does. And if you do, then you will rise towards the light. And you'll notice at the very, very, very end of the piece, the last phrase, practically, which is repeated several times, when light is achieved and everybody's happy and the two couples have arrived at maturity, then this phrase, the gods, it finally gets to the top, back to where it started, all the way up to E flat, which is the key of the piece, but it's the high E flat, the very end, you see. And you hear that 4 or 5 times at the end. There we are. So there it is, in those 3 chords, you have the whole content of what's going to come. And even the first scene of the piece has a key structure which is determined by those chords. So we start in E flat major, the overture. Then we have the first number, the first proper number, which is in C minor, the snake. In other words, the second chord of the overture, you see. And then the next piece, which is Papageno's entrance. That's That's in G, of course, has to be. G, which you have here in the second chord of the piece on the top and the third chord of the piece on the bottom. Then the next number, Tamino's Portrait Aria, in the key of the overture. Then the next two numbers, the Queen of the Night's Aria and the quintet, are in B flat, the third note of the overture. You see, so the key scheme of that entire opening sequence is stated within 3 chords. And it has this kind of musical economy, which is so phenomenal. There's simply nothing to compare to it, in fact, either in Mozart or in any other music. This sheer concentration of powerful ideas into the most simple chords. What could be simpler than those 3 chords? It's really phenomenal, and I must say there's nothing else like it. The terrifying thing is to wonder what kind of music Mozart would have been writing if he'd lived to be more than 35. Already achieving this kind of richness, it's pretty mind-blowing.